Probably not in the short term, they won't, just because nobody knows when the supply chain issues will dissipate. And as you mentioned, it's been trading at a premium, and the market's a little skittish about overall economy and other issues. So it remains to be seen. The big driver here, of course, is the iPhone. That came in below expectations, largely probably because of chip shortages. But there's a lot of doubt in the street from the folks who cover the phone business of whether or not this phone actually will outperform iPhone 13 or even rival it, given the tendency of Apple to underperform expectations in the high end for the last several years until iPhone 13. So a lot of the questions surrounding the stock was going to be put on hold until we get through the chip issues, supply issues, or a little better clarity on that. And between here and then, I think a lot of folks are just going to wait and see what happens.
Stephen, your take?
Yeah, I mean, it was all going to be about the supply chain, wasn't it? I actually feel that the current iPhone and certainly with the Mac and the Watch are both products that if people have been holding their Apple products for a while, is a good time to maybe refresh. But Apple just can't move with the chip shortage. I think it's a larger message for the whole economy. I was interviewing some of the people behind the Mac, the product heads, the hardware head of Apple, and they felt that they were doing as well as anyone because they have their long-term relationships in China in delivering the chips. And if they can't deliver them, what about the other companies that aren't as well connected? So I feel that, look, eventually there's going to be chips and people will upgrade their Apple products, but it's an alarming thing that even Apple can't get the technology, the chips, it needs to meet its expectations. And a little disturbing that Tim Cook says it's going to be worse in Apple's biggest quarter, the holiday quarter.
See my little anecdote, Wilfred, yesterday about my pal can't get the iPhone 13 in the Soho Apple Store. It turned out to be relevant here
more
with the
detail. Who the person was.
Well, that's the current quarter too, so maybe we got to plan on that going to be the case for 3 months from now.
We don't know when it's going to end, Dan.
That's why it's down 5%. That anecdote.
That anecdote. It turned out to be true. You I got to say, you are very bullish on this stock, Dan. And you were looking for this number to surpass expectations on profit. I think you were looking for $1 billion beat. So did you not anticipate that they were dealing with these headwinds at this level?
Yeah, I think what Cook told Josh, that's the key to quantifying what that supply chain issue is. 5-6 billion, you put that together. I still view this as transitory. Demand's outstripping supply by 10 million units, and it's a super cycle playing out. A third of the install base is not upgraded in the last 3.5 years. So I think the street sort of looks through this, in my opinion, as you quantify it. Given the New York City cab driver knew about supply chain issues, it just continues to be a timing issue. Supply issue is not a demand issue.
Mike, we were saying earlier in the week when Microsoft and Google rallied how much market cap was being added after night from earnings. I mean, being reversed tonight with
it is. It's, on one hand, it's a relatively contained move, meaning that the stock Apple has traded here within the last 2 weeks. It had a little bit of a run. It also has built up, because it has underperformed for the last year or so, it's built up a little bit more of a cushion on the valuation side relative to where it traded a year ago when things were really aggressive in terms of its free cash flow multiple and stuff like that. So that's probably mitigating things. But the big question is going to be, is it demand denied or demand deferred? And that's the story for a lot of the economy right now in terms of goods not being able to get to customers. Not that many companies can be $6 billion short in revenue and not feel it's material to pre-announce. I will say that, too. That's kind of shocking to show you the scale of the business for Apple.
So, Ed, what are you expecting to hear on the call and guidance?
I expect they're going to spend most of the time talking about exactly this, how long the chip shortage lasts. If Apple, and I totally agree, if Apple can't get parts, nobody can get parts. I mean, their relationship is not only deep, but they're also the largest customer for most of their suppliers. And so it just gives you an indication. Nokia said that earlier today when they announced that their 2022 is going to be worse than 2021. They're negotiating the contracts for supply now. Prices are going up. So I think they're going to spend quite a bit of time about that because it's going to affect the next several quarters, and it won't be free and clear of the overhang on the stock until the investors get some visibility of whether or not this is going to end anytime soon.
Ed, what is the risk that people decide not to bother ordering that new iPhone, ultimately realize over the last month or so that they didn't need one? And yes, we might have a disproportionately large portion of people who haven't upgraded for a while, but maybe they'll start to think they didn't need to.
I don't necessarily buy into that thesis. The last iPhone 12 was a big seller for largely that reason. First 5G phone that came out, you had a lot of the investor base had not, or the user base had not upgraded. And so you saw, I wouldn't call it a super cycle, but they did quite well. And this is very much like iPhone 6, 6S. Apple's been telling the suppliers to prepare for more phones sold this year. When you look at the details of the phone, and we've got into the guts of it, down to the chips, there's almost no difference in the phone, iPhone 13 over iPhone 12. It's pretty much cosmetic, not for performance. So I agree with you. I think what likely happens, because you've got an ecosystem that kind of locks people in, is that they pass on this phone and maybe look at the SE2, and that's been one of the most popular phones. The lower cost iPhones have been selling very well, and that comes out in the spring. So if you delay it too long, you could see it there. It's tough for people to switch to Android because you're kind of locked in, but we'll see what happens. You could wind up with the lower overall volumes than people had expected.